I can still hear her voice that night, calm, clipped, and merciless. Smile. Josephine, don't embarrass the family. It wasn't the words that cut, but the way she said family, as if it were a club I was lucky to be tolerated in. I had spent years trying to earn a place at that table, showing up when they needed me, staying silent when I should have spoken, folding myself smaller so their pride could fill the room. Every apology I made, every favor I did, was another brick in the wall that kept me out. That night, as the laughter swelled around me and my name was tossed out like a punchline, something in me finally cracked. It wasn't anger. It was the quiet, steady certainty that I'd run out of reasons to stay quiet. I remember setting my glass down and feeling the weight of all those years fall away with it. They thought I'd keep standing there, smiling through the humiliation, but they had no idea what was already shifting beneath their feet. The envelope arrived on a quiet afternoon, its ivory paper thick and deliberate, the Callahan family crest pressed deep into red wax. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. The timing, the elegance, the faint scent of my mother's favorite perfume gave it away. Inside was an invitation written in perfect cursive, the engagement of Madeline Callahan to Lieutenant Commander Ross Hale. For a moment, the air left the room. That name wasn't unfamiliar. I'd seen it before, in classified briefings, in encrypted mission reports, in casualty lists that still haunted my sleep. Operation Lynxfire, a desert, static on the radio, a man's voice calling for extraction. I folded the card carefully, tracing the wax seal with my thumb until it cracked. Of course my mother, Elaine, would be there. So would the neighbors who pitied me, the relatives who spoke my name with sighs. They'd toast to love and legacy while pretending not to wonder why I'd never built one of my own. I booked a flight to Charleston that evening. My suitcase was light, one navy dress, one pair of heels, and a small metal box that held my father's worn military ID. He'd once told me, "You don't need to shout, Joe. The right people will know when to listen." I didn't realize then that his words would echo louder than any toast waiting for me back home. Charleston hadn't changed. The magnolia trees still leaned over the narrow streets, the air still smelled of river water and salt, and the houses still looked like they were holding their breath. I slowed when I reached my mother's house. White shutters, brick steps, every inch curated to impress people she secretly despised. She opened the door with a powdered smile and that lilting drawl she saved for company. "Well, if it isn't our ghost child." "Come in, Joe." Her arms circled me, stiff and careful, like she was afraid the gesture might smudge her lipstick. Inside, the air was thick with jasmine and polish. The furniture hadn't moved in 10 years, but one thing had. The photograph of my father in uniform was gone from above the fireplace. In its place hung a large portrait of Madeline in her engagement dress, pearls around her throat, her face arranged into my mother's idea of perfection. While she poured tea, I noticed how her hands trembled, only when she thought no one was looking. "Try not to talk about your computer things tonight," she said. "People don't get it. Don't worry, I'm trained to stay quiet. Still taking orders." "I see." Her laugh was crisp and hollow, the kind that filled silence but never warmth. I went upstairs, the same stairs my father's boots once echoed on. From the window landing, I could see the Ashley River glimmering in the sun, still, patient, refusing to change for anyone. In my old room, time had turned everything fragile. The wallpaper had faded, the books smelled of dust, but the air carried something heavier, a memory that never left. I opened my suitcase, reached past the dress folded inside, and lifted the small metal box beneath it. Inside were 3 things: my father's service tag, my own, and a silver oni pin engraved with, "For those who stay silent, so others may live." I held it until my palm warmed the metal. That phrase had guided my entire life. Silence had saved others, protected missions, even spared lives. But now, it felt less like duty and more like armor. The next evening, my mother hosted a dinner for our hero, Wam. The dining room glowed under chandeliers, every glass and plate positioned like part of a photo shoot. I sat halfway down the table, where I could see but not be seen. Elaine lifted her glass, her voice sugar-coated. Our hero, Lieutenant Commander Ross Hale. Applause filled the room. Ross nodded politely. Modest in that effortless way men learn when they know the room already belongs to them. When someone asked what I did, my mother answered before I could speak. She's in the Navy too, just behind a desk. Somebody has to fix the computers, right? The table erupted in laughter. I smiled faintly, took a sip of wine, and let the burn sit behind my teeth. Ross leaned closer, easy and confident. So you're Navy too? It, right? Something like that, I said. He grinned, not catching the shift in my tone. We almost didn't make it back from Lynxfire. The comms went dark. Some female CO overrode command, saved the whole team. Never found out who she was, but she was brave as hell. The name hit like a drumbeat I hadn't heard in years. Lynxfire. I could still smell the sand, hear the static in his voice through the headset as he begged for extraction. My pulse steadied. I looked out the window, where the Ashley shimmered under the moonlight, the same calm surface that always hid its current. He had no idea the woman he was praising was sitting right beside him, pretending her wine glass was just something to hold. When dinner ended, Elaine lifted her glass again, smiling too wide. Madeline brings pride to this family. Josephine brings stability. Laughter again, practiced and cruel. I stood quietly, chair legs scraping against the floor. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Outside, the night air carried salt and magnolia. Behind me, laughter spilled from the house, bright and shallow. I stood on the porch, listening until it faded, until all I could hear was the rhythm of my own breath. Tomorrow, at the engagement party, I wouldn't have to correct them. The truth had waited long enough. It would rise on its own, like the tide. And when it did, no one in that house would be ready for it. The Charleston Yacht Club glowed like a postcard from another century. Crystal chandeliers, slow jazz, champagne bubbling in tall flutes. I stood near the edge of the room, my back against the paneled wall, holding a glass I hadn't tasted. It wasn't the kind of place built for truth. It was built for performance. Madeline floated through the crowd in ivory silk, her arm locked with Ross's. He looked every bit the war hero. Straight shoulders, polite smile, steady eyes. Guests watched them like they were royalty. My mother moved through the room in her pale green gown, rehearsed grace in every gesture. I could hear her from across the room, her voice polished and bright. Ross met our family through the naval circle, and my younger daughter, Madeline, brings such honor to our name. When someone asked about me, her tone dipped into amusement. Josephine. Oh, she's in the Navy too, but the kind that fixes printers. A few laughs scattered across the tables. I raised the glass to my lips, felt the sting of bubbles, and swallowed nothing but bitterness. Ross approached, smile easy, eyes curious. Joe, right? Your mother says you're in cyber. You'd be surprised how often our systems crash mid-mission. You'd be surprised how often we fix them mid-battle, I said. He laughed, thinking I was joking. I wasn't. He mentioned Operation Lynxfire, casually, like an old camp story. He spoke of radio failure, bad intel, the miracle that saved them. A female officer had broken the chain of command and pulled them out alive. Never knew her name, he said, but she saved us. My throat tightened. I remembered his voice crackling through static. Command! We're compromised! I'd made that call, the one that saved him. Then my mother claimed the microphone. Light washed over her sequined dress as she raised her glass. To my daughter, Madeline, and her brave fiancé, Lieutenant Commander Ross Hale, a man of courage, discipline, and strength. Applause filled the room. Then she turned, smiling in my direction. And this is my eldest, Josephine. She works with computers, probably knows how to fix Ross's printer someday. Laughter again, cruel and polite. Ross's smile faltered. I set my glass down and said, calm, but sharp enough to cut through the noise. Commander Josephine Callahan, Office of Naval Intelligence. The room froze. Ross blinked, color draining from his face. Office of Naval Intelligence? Cyber Division? He whispered. I said nothing. He dropped his glass. It shattered like a gunshot. Then he straightened, instinct taking over. Admiral on deck. The words thundered through the hall. Guests stared. My mother's face went white. Ross stood rigid, voice trembling. Ma'am, she's my commanding officer. I met his eyes, steady and unflinching. At ease, Lieutenant Commander. Whispers rippled. A few veterans in the crowd rose and saluted. My mother swayed, searching for control. My daughter, the Admiral. Why didn't you tell us? We could have invited the Navy Secretary himself. I stepped back and answered softly. Because I serve the country. Mother, not cocktail parties. The room filled with silence, thick, reverent, final. Light from the chandeliers caught on the shards of glass at our feet, scattering across the marble like a burial for every lie ever told. The words Admiral on deck still echoed in my head long after the music had stopped. For a few seconds after that shout, the room had turned to stone. Then the whispering started, a tide of confusion and embarrassment sweeping through the crowd. People who'd spent years pretending I didn't exist were suddenly all smiles, crowding close, eager to prove they had always admired me. My mother stood frozen near the stage, clutching the microphone like a life raft. Her smile trembled as she forced her voice through the static of disbelief. Well, this is unexpected, my daughter, the Admiral. We're so proud, aren't we? The guests laughed awkwardly, trying to find their place in this new order. I turned and walked toward the hallway. Behind me, the jazz band started playing again, the notes limp and unconvincing, like the last breath of a performance that had gone terribly wrong. Outside on the veranda, the air was cooler. The moonlight caught on the water of the Ashley River, silver and still. Ross followed me, his steps quick, uneven. He stopped a few feet away, his voice low and raw. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I had no idea who you were. That's the point, Commander. You weren't supposed to. He looked down, guilt softening the line of his jaw. You were the one on the radio that night, weren't you? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. He swallowed hard. It was my report, the after-action file. I used the wrong language, said the override wasn't authorized. I didn't realize it pinned the fault on you. His eyes were wet, voice cracking. I never meant to. Then you just found your second chance, I said. He nodded, wordless, and stepped back into the glow of the club. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The Charleston Post and Courier ran a headline that felt both absurd and inevitable. Navy Admiral appears at local engagement party. Guests left speechless. The photo was almost surreal. Ross standing rigid in salute. Me, frozen mid-breath. The light glinting off shattered glass at our feet. An hour later, an official email landed in my inbox. Subject, Security Review Pending. The Department of Defense had opened an investigation into unauthorized exposure of a senior officer's identity. Then my mother called. Voice sharp as ever, fear disguised as fury. Your secrecy ruined our reputation. Josephine! People think you were hiding because you're ashamed of us. No. Mother, your obsession with reputation ruined mine. I ended the call before she could respond. That afternoon, another email came, shorter, colder. Pending review of public exposure. Consider civilian contact restriction under Section 6-43. It gave me something I hadn't realized I wanted, the right to sever contact, legally and quietly. That night, I walked down to the river. The water was dark red with the reflection of the city's lights. I took the Oni insignia from my lapel, held it in my palm, and watched it shimmer beneath the moonlight. Ross had once trusted my voice to bring him home alive. Now he was offering to do the same for my name. 3 days later, his message arrived with a classified attachment, his rewritten report. He had corrected everything. Had she not acted, none of us would have survived. Her judgment saved lives. I read the line twice, then again. My eyes didn't sting. It was too clean, too precise for tears. Hours later, a secure message from Oni appeared in my inbox. Clearance restored. File closed. Commendation recommended. 3 years of suspicion erased in a single sentence. I sat alone in my temporary apartment. The hum of the city muffled through thick glass. On the table lay the morning paper. My mother and Madeline, smiling for a local reporter under the headline, "The Callahan Legacy." 2 daughters serving the nation. A beautiful story, entirely false. She hadn't called to apologize. Instead, she held a press event at the house, telling reporters her daughter was an admiral in cyber defense. When one journalist pressed for details, she stumbled, said something incorrect, and within hours the transcript circulated through internal Navy channels. By evening, another classified message reached me. Uncontrolled civilian exposure detected. Recommend immediate restriction. I printed the notice, placed it on my desk, and signed the attached form. Form 9A, Civilian Separation Protocol. My hand didn't shake. When the pen lifted, the page carried the weight of everything I'd finally let go. I hereby declare full civilian contact suspended under Section 643. No arguments, no goodbyes. Just silence. Orderly, clean, final. I folded the signed copy and placed it inside the metal box with my father's dog tags. The lid clicked shut, a sound both small and complete. Outside, the evening breeze slipped through the window, lifting the edge of the curtains. I closed my eyes and listened. Somewhere, I thought I could almost hear my father's voice again, calm and certain as ever. The right people will know when to listen, and for the first time in years, I believed him. 3 weeks after the engagement party, I sat alone in my temporary office in Washington, D.C., the city half hidden behind a fogged pane of glass. The desk was nearly bare, except for one envelope stamped with a deep blue seal. Department of the Navy, Official Correspondence. I broke the seal carefully, unfolded the letter, and read it once, slowly. Rear Admiral Josephine Callahan, for decisive command under hostile conditions during Operation Lynxfire. Your judgment directly preserved the lives of U.S. Navy personnel. Case review. Cleared. Recommendation. Commendation for distinguished service. No ceremony, no applause, just ink on paper, and the truth finally standing on its own. I traced the edge of the letter with my finger, feeling the weight of it settle quietly into my chest. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. The phone rang. My mother's voice came through, thin and trembling. "Why didn't you tell me you were this?" "Because you never asked who I was." I said, "You only told me who you wanted me to be." She went silent. Not the kind of silence that scolds, but the kind that surrenders. A text arrived from Madeline. "I didn't know. Joe, I'm sorry. You weren't supposed to." I replied. Then one more message lit the screen. "Ross, still in your debt. Admiral, you already saluted." I typed back. "That's enough." I set the phone down, turned toward the window, and watched the first light break over the Capitol. No crowds, no witnesses, just the clean, unshakable quiet of truth reclaiming its place. A month later, I settled into my new office in Washington, high above the city, the Potomac winding below like a ribbon of glass. Its water was colder than Charleston's, but the quiet was the same. I unpacked the small box I'd brought from home and arranged it on the desk. My Oni insignia, my father's worn ID tag, the Navy letter that cleared my name, and a folded copy of the civilian separation document I'd signed. Each item had its place. Each one belonged to a life that had finally stopped asking for permission. That afternoon, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, Ross's SEAL team, smiling under a desert sky. On the back, written in steady ink, were the words, "For the one who stayed silent so we could live." I held it for a long moment before sliding it into the box. That was all I needed. Across the country, my mother hosted a small party, boasting to her friends that her daughter was an admiral. When a reporter asked what division I commanded, she faltered, stumbled over her words, and ended the event early. The next morning, the headline read only 4 words: "Silence runs deep." For once, she understood that quiet could speak louder than pride. A week later, Madeline's wedding invitation arrived with a note in her handwriting. Ross wanted to say thank you again. I didn't go. Instead, I sent a gift, a watch engraved with the words "Time owed, time paid," on the RSVP. I wrote simply, "Regrets, classified engagement. Later." I learned that during the ceremony. A Navy SEAL stood suddenly from his seat and saluted toward an empty chair at the back of the room. No one knew why. Ross did, and that was enough. A year later, I returned to Charleston. No ceremonies, no reunions, no invitations waiting. I only wanted to see the place I had once left behind. The Ashley River was clearer in autumn light, its surface pale silver, beneath a sky stretched thin. I stood at the dock where my father had taught me to swim. I could almost hear his voice again, steady, patient. When the tide pulls you, don't fight it. Let it carry you somewhere new. I unclipped the Oni insignia from my jacket and let it fall into the water. It sank slowly, catching the last gold flicker of sun before disappearing beneath the current. The wind rose, carrying the faint chime of a distant church bell. I breathed in, steady and full, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. Not because I had been seen, but because I no longer needed to be. Some truths don't need to be shouted. They just stand and get saluted. I turned away from the river and walked into the fading light. No applause followed, only the soft, constant murmur of wind over water, an unspoken salute from life itself.